In this video, I'll try and make my fly press even more awesome than it already is. It's such a cool tool, it's extremely versatile, it can be used to bend metal in a controlled way, it can forge, punch, shear, and many more tasks that you can think of if you use your imagination. It doesn't need any power, it's also very quiet, and all round it's just about my favourite tool. And as I like them that much, I now have a second one. Anyway, when I mount the tooling, it's a bit fiddly and clumsy. It takes a minute or two to line them up and secure them down. It's done with a couple of clamps either side of the tool, and then they're bolted down with a wrench. I'm hoping to upgrade the whole system by making this quick release mechanism, and if it works I'll be able to change the tooling in seconds, which for some tasks will be a massive improvement. I'll use this 12mm or 1/2 inch plate as the base. That will get bolted down using these nuts, but first I'll start on the interesting bit, which is making the mechanism itself. This is also 12mm mild steel flat bar, and this will be the tool plate, and each tool I use will be welded to one of these. The system will work with dovetails, so I'll mill 45-degree angles on 2 of the edges. I could have done this on the belt grinder, but it's always fun to use the miller machine, and when I did buy this machine I had no idea what I was going to use it for, but now that I have it I use it all the time and I love it. That's one side done. Now I'll quickly do the other side, and this digital bevel gauge is great for setting up the angles. The dovetails should be pretty good, but I think there's a bit of leeway. They don't need to be perfect, although I am trying to keep things fairly accurate. The next pieces will be built around the tool plate, and I cut and mill those off camera. These 2 pieces need opposing dovetails milled onto them to match the tool plate, but while all the pieces are still square and easier to hold in the vise, I'll drill the mounting holes through them first. I thought about welding the pieces together, but I like the idea of being able to pull it apart and replacing anything if needed in the future. I got a bit carried away here and countersunk the bottom piece. Anyway, that doesn't actually matter, and next I'll mill the dovetails. Now I'll find the centre of the tool plate, which I can then use to position it on the base plate and then centre it to the fly press, and also to help position it I'll turn a point on this round bar, which I can then install as a top tool in the fly press and line it up to the tool plate. I've placed the base where I want it to be, so I'll centre the tool plate to it, and then I'll square the front edge of that to the front edge of the base. It doesn't actually need to be perfect, but it's nice to keep things square and looking right. Now I have those marks, I can position the tool plate and drill and tap the holes in the base to attach all the other pieces to, and I'll use a transfer punch to mark the centre through one of the holes. I only need to mark one hole, as I've lined up the edge of the plate to the front edge of the table, so now I can move the table back 60mm to drill the second hole and match the hole spacing in the part that gets bolted to it. To tap the hole, I put the machine at its slowest setting of 75 RPM, tap down, stop the spindle, and then reverse it back out. The bolts really aren't quite long enough. They're 30mm, and I've ordered some 35mm ones, but these will have to do for now. As expected, the tool plate doesn't quite fit under the top piece, so I need to mill some clearance. I could do that on the tool plate, but that would mean I'd have to do the same to every tool plate for each tool, so instead I'll mill the underneath of this top piece. And that's just about perfect. Now for the other side, and that side the dovetail is floating and the second piece next to it gets fixed down. They need a bit of clearance between them, so I use the paddle pop stick. Now I need to put some pressure onto the dovetails to hold that tool plate tightly in place, and to do that I'm going to use a cam lever. That will get bolted down to the plate and it will pivot on a bolt. I also need to put a slot in this bottom piece here, and then that should put enough pressure onto the dovetails to hold it firmly. I'll make the cam lever from 6mm or 1/4 inch flat bar. The cam lever is what will make the system quick to use without any need to use a wrench to bolt anything down. I'm just checking where to put the pivot hole for it to work correctly and that its action misses the mounting holes of the other pieces. The pivot hole is off center and that's what creates the cam action, and I think that looks pretty good, so I'll mark and drill the hole. Now I need to make the slot for the lever, and I'll do that on the milling machine. This small clamp pallet that I made is awesome for quickly setting the workpiece to 45 degrees using dowel pins. The only thing is it needs to be much bigger. It's just big enough for this part though, but I will make another when I get the chance. I'll mark the hole slightly over from centre by about 1mm. This will probably make the lever too close, but I can easily grind some off as needed. For tapping, I really shouldn't be using a keyless chuck, but I did chance it. When reversing the tap back out, it can loosen the chuck, just like now. Anyway, it wasn't too difficult to remove it manually. The lever slightly catches and needs a bit more clearance, so I filed a little off the corner of this piece, and I also ground some off the inside radius of the lever. That works great, so next I'll bend the handle of the lever up a touch, and I'll do that on the fly press, and I'll show you just one of the many tasks that you can use the fly press for. You could easily make a quick jig to do this, especially if you had a run of them to make, or something similar like brackets, and they would all come out exactly the same. Pretty cool, hey? And it only took a few seconds. I did put the bend a little too close to the cam, so I needed to file a touch off just for some clearance. I think this is going to work great, so I'll move on and I'll make a stop for the tool plate. I could use it as it is, but to finish it properly, it still needs a couple more things. One is to retain the floating dovetail and stop it from coming out. I'll do that by overhanging a washer on either end. And the last thing to do to the mechanism is to take off these corners. It really isn't necessary, but it'll give better access to the tooling and it'll just look a bit more finished. Next, I'll attach it to the fly press, I'll line it up and then mark and drill the mounting holes. If you're looking for some cool shop projects and woodworking plans, I've assembled a ton of free resources to help inspire your next build. You can find those by clicking in the link in the description below. There's projects like my handle making jig, sawhorse plans and small parts organizer and many more that you can download for free directly from my site paskmakes.com. So make sure to find the link in the description below, check out my site and snag a set of free plans for your next great shop project. I've got new mounting bolts and these are Countersink M16. This is the biggest countersink I have. It's 28mm and I need it to be 30mm. So I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I'll give it a go and I'll try this chamfer wood route a bit. I wouldn't say it was 100% happy, but it did make chips and it did do a pretty good job. The nuts for the original bolt are a different thread to the countersink ones that I'll be using, so I need to make new nuts. I've already started by turning down a piece of round bar so that fits in there, and I've flattened one side. I just need to flatten another side, drill a couple of holes and thread those and then split it into two. My longer bolts just arrived in the mail, so I'll swap those out now, and off camera I made another quick release tool holder for the other fly press, so now the tools are interchangeable between the two. Next I quickly made a bunch of tool plates, and this time I set up an angle table and fence on the belt grinder. This did a great job and much faster than the milling machine and took about 15 minutes to do 9 of them. Here's a couple of dies that I use on the fly press. I'll chop them off this flat bar and then weld them onto a tool plate and give them a go. Now I can weld that to the tool plate, and I'll do that by putting the top tool in and lining it up, and I'll weld it right here in place because they do need to match it up with each other. But first of all I need to chop the bar off this one, it's not the right size, and put a new one on. I also made collars for the top tool which will provide a flat even surface to rest up against the fly press. I've been meaning to do this for a long time but just haven't gotten around to it. I'll weld the collar to the bar and then grind it flush and weld tooling onto that. That's both of the dies, they're much better than they used to be and another good job done. It only takes a few seconds to fit the top tool, and now I can line up and position the bottom die to it. To avoid any unwanted spatter while I'm welding, I'll spray anti-spatter spray around the surrounding area. I'll just tack it in place and then I'll take it over to the welding table to finish it, and I also tack the other die in place as well. While I was welding those, I also made a few fullering dies off camera, and I made a simple holder from plywood to store the dies on the wall. I just glued and brad nailed it together and then gave it a couple of coats of varnish. Not all of the tooling is suitable with a quick release system like this bending jig, which just doesn't fit. So I've made another base plate with a series of drilled and tapped holes, and I can use those to clamp down different jigs. And some jigs and tooling just don't need to be quick to change either. It's mainly the forging tools where I may need several tools to do a task in a short time. I rounded over the corners, and I also did the corners on the other base plate too. For now, I could only find one suitable bolt, but it shows you how I will clamp things down, and I could also bolt a jig like this directly down to the base plate, which I think I'll do. Just to show you it in action, I've grabbed a scrap of square tubing, and I usually use this jig for bending solid steel, but this is just to give you an idea. I've lit the forge and I'm heating up a piece of rebar to give the forging dies a test run. I haven't planned this at all, and I don't really know what I'm trying to achieve, but anyway, I'll squish some hot steel and see the forging dies in action. I'll try the large fullering die that I just made next and see how that goes. That works great, I really like it, and it's heaps of fun to use. I'll put the flat dies back in and square it up, and I've put a timer on the screen to show how long it takes to change the tooling. That's not too bad, and I could definitely do it quicker. I flattened the bar, now I'll square up the edges a little for no reason but just to try it. I have a stop set on the top of the fly press. That limits the travel of the die and it keeps the forging consistent. And I reckon that worked awesome, especially as I had no plan. Anyway, I'm super happy with what I've achieved in this video, and I reckon it's going to make using the fly press even better. If you want to see more of the fly press in use, watch this video here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.